And welcome back to part 2 of this little ramble about watches in general and Rolexes in particular. As you can see, I've got my other 3 watches out of the safe. I've got my 2 Zeniths, the Captain chronograph and the Pilot chronograph, along with my recent, one of my more recent buys, which is this Omega Speedmaster, the first Omega in space, which I've already done a review about. So enough of that. And also over here in the corner, hiding away, is my Tag Heuer Carrera, which is kind of like my everyday watch, my beta watch. Sad to say, because it's still quite an expensive watch, but that's the role it takes. And there we are, looking back at the 3 Rolexes that I own. What I want to do now is to discuss where I go from here. I've got 7 watches, which for me feels a little bit too many. I think I'd be happy with 5. The problem is I like all the watches I've got, and I like lots of other watches that I may get in the future, so it's going to be very difficult to try and cut it down and part exchange or sell some of these watches. I think these 3 are safe for now, at least. Let's get it in the sunshine, in the late sunshine there. So I think these 3 at least are still pretty safe. The 1 or 2s which aren't are going to be perhaps the Omega, as it's quite similar in style and in sort of use to my Pilot. In fact, they both might go, who knows. It all depends what I get next. And in terms of what I get next, I have been thinking about, should I go to a next level up to VC, AP, even PP, that is Patek Philippe. But there are some problems with doing that, which I want to go through now. Some are more emotional than practical, but nevertheless they're still quite important. The first one is brand image. Like Breitling, which I don't like their image. The watches are great, but the image is terrible. Patek have, for me, a terrible brand image. Yes, they're expensive, yes, they're high-end, but the image they portray of that kind of blonde, white, Aryan super race living in a mansion in Switzerland, and you never own a Patek, you're just holding it for another generation, blah blah bloody blah, is a real turn-off for me, and I probably wouldn't buy a Patek just because of that reason. But then again, for me, the watch that the obvious Patek watch to buy would be the Nautilus. Which particular one I'm not sure, perhaps the chronograph or perhaps the plain 3-dialer. I mean, they start at about 14, 15, 16,000 pounds, and that's a hell of a lot of money. Now, if they were 2 or 3 times better made than a Rolex, you could understand it. But I question if a Patek Philippe at that level, at sort of sub 20,000 pounds or even sub 50,000 pounds, is really worth it compared to something like a Rolex in terms of the quality, in terms of the movement and construction and reliability, and even the servicing costs, which I believe for a Patek, as for AP and VT, are absolutely horrendous. You know, you're looking at £1,000 plus for a service, and your watch is away for God knows how long. It goes off to Switzerland for months on end. The other factor is style. I mean, the Nautilus, quite honestly, is absolutely horrendous. I mean, I'm not wearing bell bottoms anymore, I'm not wearing a tank top anymore, it's not the 70s anymore, I'm not driving a Austin Allegro anymore, so why the hell would I wear a Patek Nautilus, which is one of the ugliest watches I've ever seen. Yes, it would go with an Austin Allegro, a tank top and bell bottoms from the 70s, but we're not in the 70s, and so that is absolutely out for me. In fact, the only watch that's even uglier than a Patek Nautilus is a Patek Aquanaut, which is even worse. I mean, honestly, have you seen those things? They're absolutely vile. If it didn't have Patek on the dial, they would be laughed out of court, they really, really would. And so moving on now to AP, and the obvious candidate would be the Royal Oak and the Royal Oak Overseas. Now, the Overseas has had so many specials, it's unreal, and it's a bit too big for me anyway, at 44mm, and it wears big as well with that integrated case and bracelet. So that leaves us with the standard Royal Oak at 39mm, although it does wear a little more, I think. And again, I'm not that impressed, to be honest. It's another Gerard Genta 70s style watch. It might have been cool in 1973, but it ain't cool now to me. They're also scratch magnets, they have high maintenance costs. I believe they're not quite as robust as something like my Daytona. And on top of that, the nail in the coffin for me are the hands. they're vile. No, actually they're not vile. They're more like a play school hands. They're sort of very childish. I would expect those hands to be seen on a child's Timex or something. I mean, I just can't get past that. But for me, the styling is terrible, so that's out as well. So now we move on to VC and their overseas model. And they do, again, both three-handers and chronographs and God knows what else. That's recently been updated, and I must say the blue dial they've done is really nice. If I can dig out a photograph of that, I'll show it here now. There it is. But again, God, the price, they just put the price up and up and up. And I just question whether that is any kind of value for money. Not that any Swiss watch is value for money, but when this thing cost £8,000, is it really worth it? Is it really 3 times better than something like this? I don't think so. So, looking around, what else is there? There's JLC. Yes, I like JLC. They're kind of in the same mold as Zenith. They make great movements, but most of the styles really don't do it for me. I could maybe think about a chronograph, a master chronograph, but it's actually quite similar in style to my good old Captain. In fact, it's almost identical. So I probably wouldn't go for that. And the rest of the more sort of sporty style watches don't feel quite right for me. It's like they're trying too hard. I don't consider JLC to be a kind of dive watch, sports watch type company, so I don't think so. So which lends us straight back to Rolex. And looking at sort of higher end Rolex, you're looking at a precious metal Rolex probably. So I'm looking at maybe a rose gold Daytona, or maybe a rose gold day date. The recent day date's been reduced down to 40 millimeters, and they're bloody expensive. But just as an object, they're so beautiful. And I have seen one with a sort of white quartered dial in rose gold, which I really like. I have no use for a rose gold day date at 20 odd grand. I don't go to black tie events. I'm not a CEO of a big company. I spend most of my time in jeans and t-shirts messing about with motorbikes, and yet that does appeal to me. It's so kind of well made and just so right. So in fact, I'll show you a photograph of the one that I like. Here it is now. And there it is. I haven't seen one yet in the flesh, but you never know. When the time comes and I've got the money, that may call to me. But if I do go for a precious metal Rolex, I probably won't go to an AD for the first time ever, because the discounts available elsewhere from a grey market, whatever, are so huge. I'm talking £5,000. You'll be daft not to consider that. I don't know yet what kind of discount I could get from an AD. I suspect it'd be quite good compared to these, because I got sod all for these. But we'll see. We'll see. I won't be looking until probably next spring anyway. It's actually quite strange the way I've become a kind of Rolex fanboy over the last 5 years or so, because prior to that, for 20 years, I really didn't like them at all. The only folks who I knew owned one were kind of the typical exuberant, egotist, showy-offy, you know, sort of showing off how much money they got, flaunting their wealth type people, you know, your sort of second-hand car dealer type people, which wasn't me at all, which is why the Zenith really appealed to me. It was kind of under the radar, even though it was, to me, just as good a watch, if not better. But then, over time, I kind of got a bit sick of losing so much money on new watches, so I did start to look at Rolex and sort of reconsider if my ideas about the owners were actually right, and even if they were, was it really correct of me to ignore them just because of that? So my first Rolex was the Submariner, and after that my second watch wasn't one of these three. It was an Explorer 1. It's not here because it wasn't bought for me. It was bought for a relative of mine who had been ill for a very long time and got better, and so I always said to myself, if he recovers, then I'll buy him a Rolex watch. He's actually a great Bond fan, so it was a kind of choice between a Rolex Explorer 1 and the Seamaster, Omega Seamaster, and I could have got him a Bond special, but as it turned out, I did go for the Rolex, and I think I made the right choice. He's certainly very happy with it and very surprised, because he knew nothing about it at the time. So in fact, I may try and get that back off him for an afternoon and do a little video about that particular watch. But that can wait for another day. So I think we should end it there. I've been going on far too long. It's amazing how long you can talk for about something as simple as a watch. But there you go. No doubt I probably missed out half a dozen things I would like to talk about, but there just isn't time on a 10-minute long YouTube video. Perhaps I'll do a part 3 at some point in a few weeks' time. Until then, take care and thanks for watching and cheers.